goes it, everybody? So another guild night about to be in the books. We got somebody good here for you, but before he gets to have his 5 minutes of fame tonight, a couple quick announcements. Chris's workshop for this weekend is being pushed to January, so watch for that. You'll see more coming out about that soon. It'll be really cool, so let's show up for that one when it goes. Next week, Christmas social. Come out, hang out, drink, party, have a little bit of fun with us, close out the year. We're not doing a talk tonight, but if somebody shows up and starts playing with a cool toy, you never know what's going to happen. And then the 31st, right? Pew Pew Day. So go do a guild shoot. That one should be fun. If you've got guns, bring them out. Come have some fun. We'll be out there most of the day. You can show up for an hour. You can show up all day. Have fun. Say again? I don't know. Where is that? Yeah, info will be in the Discord. And that's really all we have for announcements. We're closing the year out, so there's not much happening. People are heading to see family and leaving, so it's kind of quiet. With that, we have Crispy here tonight to talk about some of the new fancy fun stuff he's found with detection engineering. I'm sure y'all are tired of hearing me over these last 2 minutes and 30 seconds, so I'll give you to Crispy.
So tonight we're going to be going over Purple Team Emulation with a focus on detection engineering. And we'll go through that process and really dive into detection engineering side. Who am I? If you're unfamiliar, if you haven't been around the guild in a while, I'm Chris Peacock. I do adversary emulation detection engineering. I'm pretty much a blue team lead guy over at Scythe. My background is Raytheon Intelligence and Space. Before there, I was at General Dynamics. And prior to that, I was at Alpha 2. So I've been a lot of places, but I only have about half a decade in the field. And I do have some certifications. If you really want to know what they are, you can check out my LinkedIn, but I'm not going to write them up here. So one of the things with adversary emulation for Purple Team is about having a process. And what that process comes down to is taking threat intelligence, developing an attack plan, and then implementing that and track that with the detection and the response side. What this looks like in a cycle, you get new CTI, TTPs are introduced. From there, you analyze, you gather that, and you start building out a plan. And then what we say to do is kind of do a tabletop discussion if you're doing this in a formal way with an organization. Following that up, you want to emulate and actually put that plan into action. And that emulation then will generate data for the SOC to either respond to, or maybe they won't respond, but that's why we're doing this. And then where I come in really most of the time is to help with the detection engineering when the SOC doesn't actually catch something or alert on things. And then this cycle can go over and over again, especially if you have an in-house red team, because let's say you implement a plan and you go around and you do the plan and you start catching PowerShell, so now you're catching your team all the time with PowerShell. So then they say, okay, we're going to do unmanaged PowerShell or also known as PowerPick. That's another common way to bypass that detection. So now your red team does that, your blue team's not catching them, and so you can go around and around as red teams evolve, or as new CTI gets introduced, or new tools or techniques or procedures come out. So with that, we started the cyber threat intelligence side of it, and one of the biggest things that we talk about is understanding the organization. You have to know your organization, what data you have, what are your processes, where do you operate, geopolitical issues, things like this. You have to understand your organization, what data you have, where that data is. From there, you can try to start identifying adversaries who would be interested in your data or your processes and procedures. So any type of intellectual property may be targeted, or any other type of data. It also could be different adversaries who aren't necessarily about your organization, but they just want to make money. So you also have their motivation in that aspect. From there, we gather the threat intelligence, you extract the TTPs, then you analyze and organize it. That creates your plan, and then you get to the red team side, which is the emulation of the adversary. So one of the things that we go over, though, is what is a component of a threat. When you start looking at what a component of a threat is, it's intent, capability, and opportunity. So what that comes down to is intent, who or what they are targeting. So that's going to be dependent upon what you have, if you fall into that scope or not. Like we said, they could be targeting something for financial gain. They could be targeting something because they're part of a nation state. It just really depends, but it comes down to the intent of that actor. The other side of it is capability. This is their tools, their exploits, their training, their tradecraft. So what that comes down to is really how large of an organization they are, because of that really comes down to financing it. So that's where we're seeing where ransomware actors are actually stepping up. Ransomware actors are stepping up their capability because they make millions and millions, if not, we've seen some estimates that they've made billions of dollars. So when you get that financial backing, you're able to actually up your capability. When you up your capability, now you're more of a threat. Following that, you have opportunity. This is one area that the organization can actually have some control over. You can't really control who targets you. You can't really control their capability, but opportunity is something that you can limit. So, things like patching can influence opportunity. Knowing your threat landscape, what you have exposed to the internet, things like that. So all this coming together helps you realize what threats are actually of concern to your organization. Don't worry about threats that don't have an intent to really go after you. You're wasting time if you're looking at those threats. Those people, those actors are in someone else's threat profile, but they're not in your threat profile necessarily. I've seen it before where I've had like elementary schools actually going out there and they're trying to gather intelligence on China attacking South Korea. And it's like you're wasting time reading these intel reports and trying to do anything about it because that's not your threat. Right now your threat is ransomware. Maybe you should start working on trying to catch the Conti ransomware playbook, which got dropped. You can go through that, and also knowing how to catch Cobalt strike beacons and such. So one of the walkthroughs with this is you identify CTI on an adversary who may target your organization. This is kind of the process that you want to go through. So for this, I'm just going to say we've identified that Chinese actors are targeting our industry. We know that. We also see the procurement of sensitive data relative to the strategic objectives of the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, the Chinese 5-year plan, and Belt and Road Initiative. So this is one of those things that we're building, and we're saying, look, we're definitely in the threat profile because we're checking all these boxes for them. So we should really be concerned about this adversary. And then when you say we've identified several tools and techniques overlaps between Chinese groups, so we seek to cover all of them. This is where certain areas of Chinese government targets different things. But one of the things is once you have a procurement cycle, a lot of times you procure something that gets shared amongst things, so that or amongst organizations in there, or training might get shared about. It's kind of like here in the U.S. SANS may train an NSA hacker, and then later on they may train someone for the CIA or FBI or any 3-letter agency really for that matter. It's probably going through some level of SANS training. So this is one of those things where training gets shared, tools get shared as well in different areas. So for this we're saying that we do focus on all the groups because of the tools and techniques can have overlaps, but we do prioritize the strategic objectives that would align with targeting our organization. So that means if we see a certain group in China that's actively targeting, either our competitors or things in our field, that we're going to highlight those more. So once you identify your CTI, you want to go out and you want to find, or once you identify the adversary, you want to go out and find CTI. This is actually pretty hard to do if you're not really in government, because let's be honest, there's not going to be a lot of CTI out there for you because most of the stuff stays closed sourced and private. But there are good sources. We'll cover a few. And for that, right here, what we did is we went online and we started searching for Chinese activity we went through some blogs. I found a Microsoft blog, and it says it's on adversary DEV0322 targeting defense industrial base and software companies. So we've identified the adversary, we've identified a group that's targeting. For our fictitious company, we'll say that it is a DIB company, that's defense industrial base with a software arm as well. So one thing is once you've gone down this route of saying who's going to target us, okay, we found a group, we need to collect on that group. You want to make sure too that the group's name isn't already used someplace else and you have collections on them. So I'll share these slides afterwards, but one of the things we recommend doing is Florian Roth actually put together a whole process on, or it's a whole document that lays out different names that are used by different CTI vendors. So here we see APT2 is also known as Putter Panda or PLA unit, and it goes on to SecureWorks and Cisco Group 36. So we can see, you know, different names that are used by different CTI vendors to track these. And this is where also you may have internal tracking where you come up with own names as well. But do know that there are definitely several names. So whatever you decide on, for this instance, we're saying dev0322 is what we're going to go over. But we need to make sure that we're not already tracking that threat somewhere. So then at the end of the day, we'll either pipe it into something that we already have, or we'll create a new line on our Excel sheet for this. And that's just going to be in here. So let's see, if I click in, you can see you can go into Russia and they have the names. So this is what you would start doing to try to look that up. Some other common resources that you might want to look into when you're doing this process is CISA. CISA actually has a search. If you go to search.us-cert.gov, you type in a country you may be interested in, or different adversaries that you might be interested in, and they'll pop up there. There's an example on that search. MITRE ATT&CK pages. A lot of times MITRE ATT&CK does not get down to the procedural level. It stays at the tactic level, which is not necessarily the best thing for when you're wanting to emulate something, because if it says dump creds, well, you know, there's 50 ways to dump creds. So what tools are they using, or what procedures are they using to actually do that? That's one of the things that you need to get down to. But on the MITRE ATT&CK pages, a lot of times if you go down to the bottom, you can get to references, and from there you can actually find out what they're citing, and those will often contain procedures. Mandiant Blog is another good one. Palo Alto Unit 42 is a good one. The DFIR report, Talos Threat Intelligence, any public CTI pretty much published cyber threat intelligence that's finished is probably what you're going to be consuming if you are just getting into this. So what does that look like? So here is where we took out one of the paragraphs from that Microsoft blog, and we started saying, hey, here's two procedures that we can use. We can emulate these. So we have MSHTA executing, you know, from a publicly hosted network. So we can emulate that. We also have who am I being outputted to a text. So we can also do that as well. And then there's others that we can also look at leveraging in our emulation plan as well. But what we're trying to get at from the CTI standpoint, the cyber threat intelligence standpoint, is that we are trying to get down and extract these out, these type of procedures, so that then we can hand them to a red team to actually replicate those in our network. What does this look like full-blown scale? You can see where like this is a very densely populated paragraph, and there's really no great way of just going through and practicing this over and over again and learning you know, how to actually categorize these. But you can see where different things like Mimikatz gets mapped to a software, Puppy gets mapped to another software. We have hash values, which is an IOC, an indicator of compromise. We call those atomic IOCs. Those are very small level granular things where you have some more generic IOCs. We do see T1003 of credential dumping. So this is where we're starting to get more down to the procedure level, where they have proc dump to dump LSAS process. So that's a good procedure level that we've identified there that we can emulate now. So when you're going through your CTI work, what you want to do is you want to start laying out the tactic levels and then filling in your descriptions. So you'll go through and you'll start mapping it out, and this gives the emulation team something that they can start figuring out how they're going to emulate it, and it also gives them a path. So, you know, objective, what's the adversary after? Command and control, how's that set up? What's it over? Is it going out over DNS? Is it going out over HTTPS? What does that look like? Are they using Google Sheets for C2? Are they using Twitter for C2? Different things that you might want to emulate. And then you get into the other areas of actions on objectives. How are they going to execute? What discovery commands and techniques are they going to use? Privilege escalation, so on and so forth. So what does this look like when you finally fill it out? Well, here's an example that we had from Orange Worm, where we went through and we actually started mapping out everything. This doesn't fill in the procedure level. That's documented elsewhere. Obviously, that would get pretty big, but this is where we've gone ahead and we've mapped out, at least to the tactic level, what that looks like after you collect. And this might actually be going out and getting multiple CTI reports and then condensing them down into one emulation plan. So, red team emulation side. This is where there are so many tools out there to do this. The problem is a skill set, all right? The C2 matrix, it was done, it's been put together by our CTO, my boss, George. He does a great job of working with a lot of the C2 vendors or producers. So some of the highlights, we look at those. Merlin's a decent one. We also have Cobalt Strike's on here, but that's not public. And I'm drawing the other blank. It's from Trusted Sec. I'll get it later. I'll post it. But yeah, I'm drawing a blank on it for some reason. But there's several free ones out there that you can use, C2 frameworks, and that's what you use to perform your emulations. So that's from the red side. So remember, we've taken the CTI, we've extracted our CTI after figuring out who we wanted to look at. So we identified an adversary interested in us, we gathered CTI, we removed the procedure level, and we give that to the red team to emulate. One of the other areas, if you're just starting out and you can't really dive down to the procedure level yet, Atomic Red Team does some of this, and you can at least perform tactics. So you're able to perform tactics on MITRE. Some tactics will have 2, 3, 4 procedures that you can practice that adversaries do leverage, and that's definitely a great starting point, especially if you don't have a CTI team to go out and gather and compile things for you. Definitely recommend starting with Atomic first. So we have the exercise coordinator, which you didn't really go over. That's who typically manages a purple team or is a manager of a SOC or a manager, director of a program, a security program. And then we also went over red team, and now we'll dive more into the blue team and detection engineering side. If you want to do the red team stuff, we're going to have a great talk. It'll be free on that actually coming. And I can't say who the person is yet, but that'll come out, and they write some pretty cool tools. So that'll be an interesting free talk. I'll definitely pump that because he's awesome to work with. So getting into the blue team side though, after we've gathered the emulation and we've ran the emulation, we have to look at the blue team. What were the alerts? Were there alerts? If there were alerts, were there responses to those alerts, or did they not generate a response? I've seen multiple times where something doesn't generate a response. They'll be like, well, we require that it has a Splunk score of 80 or something for a threat before we get to it, which means that it's going to have to trigger 5 or 8 alerts, which to me is just ridiculous. Sometimes, if it's a single alert, that's good enough. You should highlight that and it should get worked. So a lot of times you might have an alert already triggering on something, but you have to figure out how to get that response to it. And then once you do get the response, is the response actually appropriate? That's a huge part of it. is knowing if it's an appropriate alert or response or not to it. Sometimes there'll be a response and people will say that's a false positive. Well, that's not the appropriate response. Also, people will miscategorize of what phases of a kill chain it is or something. So maybe they say, oh, this just hopped on the host. Oh, we're pretty sure, you know, it came from an email. And then lo and behold, it actually came from lateral movement. So that's the other area of where your response isn't appropriate if all it is to clean that one machine. You're actually missing the whole campaign, which is a huge problem. And then the other thing you have to look at is, are there logs or are there gaps in logs? So if an alert comes in, do you actually have the logs so that you have the capability to go back and make those determinations that we just went over? Sometimes it might be someone gets an AV alert, but then they don't have any logs to really understand where that came from. So they don't know, they're just kind of, they're just wandering around aimlessly, just saying, hey, there's an AV alert, but we don't know what to do about it. So log collection is a huge part. So that's just a quick touch on the blue team side, and then we'll get into detection engineering. So this is where detection engineering fits in. We're over here at step 5 after the emulation plan. We figured out what the blue team did or didn't do, or what they missed. So now we have direction, because that drives our direction of what we need to end up catching. And then from there, we need to collect, process, and then disseminate it back to the organization. So one of the things of detection engineering, it's not necessarily always going to flag on every time it's going to be malicious. The purpose is to detect suspicious events that may be indicative of malicious actors. We do actually encourage a certain level of false positives, because you're going to have some false positives when you're trying to find suspicious activity. That's just the nature of it. But we don't try to just weed out everything and get too granular, or you'll miss suspicious activity. One of the things, the pyramid of pain, what this goes over, if you're unfamiliar with David Bianco's pyramid of pain, is what it takes an adversary to change things. So to change a hash, it's very trivial. To change an IP, it's easy. Domains, changing domains is very simple. And as you get up, now when they change tools, that's hard for them to want to move from, because you have training on that tool. You may have built a tool. You may have procured or purchased a tool. So tools become costly to change, because you have to actually go out and buy or develop a new tool, or you have to go out and you have to retrain how to use on a new tool. And then so all that, and then you get up, and TTPs are the toughest area to change, because that's when you're actually going through and you're retraining someone. There's a human hacker somewhere behind the keyboard, and what they're doing is something that they're programmed to do at the end of the day, because they've been trained, or they follow a guidebook of what they're going to do. And so changing that is very difficult, especially compared to, say, an IP or a hash. And typically, we know IOCs for hashes and IPs, there's just so much data, and you're probably also typically, like I've seen before, where ransomware actors, or not ransomware actors, customers will say, hey, there's a ransomware attack, and we want the IOCs. Well, for one, the IOCs of this hash is not going to be the same hash that hits your organization. Most likely, when you see that hash in your organization, that's going to be the first time that anyone besides the ransomware actors have seen that hash. So trying to block that's not the best thing. WannaCry was a specific example, right? Because that's actually a worm where it's the same hash over and over again as it worms. It also had a static domain as well. So that's just a certain area. There are certain threats out there where, yes, a hash, an IP, or domain can come into play, and you should block it. But more often than not, these things are just going to be changed so much that it's not going to matter. So you need to focus detecting up there on the TTP section. The other thing of note, most of these are dealt by vendors. So, I mean, you're most likely not going to be able to do, better network detection than say like a Palo Alto at their firewall, or Gabriel's company or whatever, where they actually have dedicated engineers really doing this in network traffic. Because network traffic is something that it's pretty strict about how you detect malicious things, where getting into like an EDR, that's something where the vendor can't necessarily scope down as much as they can compared to say like network traffic. So we have some strategic drivers of detection engineering or threat hunting. This depends what you want to call it. When I first started out, this was called content development, where you're developing content. Then it was threat hunting. Now, whenever your threat hunt results in a rule that goes into an alert, that's called detection engineering now. But anyways, we have three strategic drivers of this. We have the operational capability, the data collections, and the threat understanding. And we'll dive into each one of these and what it means. For data collection, it's what data are you collecting? Do you even know what you're collecting? And how do you prioritize data sources? Because if you start with not a lot of data, then there's not really much for us to dive into. What does that mean though? So here you see attack technique count per data source, and the most applicable is actually going to be command execution. So if you can actually log commands on a host and get that back for an analyst to look at, that is going to be one of your most important data sources that you can have. And then followed by that is process creation and then file modification. And the thing is for the longest time, most people did not log these at all. Most people logged network traffic and they logged their AV alerts. So this shows you why you need something like a Sysmon, or you need a EDR to collect these data sources. The other one is the operational capacity. I kind of say this is like the detection cyborg. It's the level of capability and proficiency between analysts and the tools. All right, the greater your operational capability, the better you're going to drive your threat detections. One of the things is time is actually another limitation as well, because say your detection engineer is also a tier 3 SOC analyst and an incident responder. Well, they're not going to be doing a whole lot of detection engineering if they're busy working, tier 2 alerts that have gotten onto their plate. So detection is definitely another one. It takes time to understand the attack, time to determine logs, what to look at. Querying can be unbelievably long when you're actually trying to do baselines over 7 days or 30 days in a huge, elk stack or Splunk stack or whatever SIM you're running. Querying can really run a long time. And then it also takes time to document, so that's where time is definitely a huge impact. But really, great tools, they'll be underutilized by novice analysts, and then also great analysts can be hindered by inefficient tools. So just knowing how these package together in the operational capacity definitely helps, from a strategic, from the manager side of what you need to do to have people actually execute on this. Threat understanding is another strategic driver, and the last one. The big thing is from this, we don't operate in a vacuum. So understanding your threat landscape. This goes back, when I first started out, people really didn't know about PowerShell. They didn't know that PowerShell was being used maliciously. They didn't understand what a lawbass or a lawbin was. So people didn't know to look for these. So having an understanding of what's out there to be used against you, that helps your threat understanding go up. You're not going to log PowerShell logs if you don't know PowerShell is used maliciously. So you have to know what's out there and being used so that you know what to log and you know what rules to write. And then the other thing is staying in your threat landscape as well. Once again, if you're in elementary school, don't start collecting and worrying about China's latest, greatest hacks against, South Korea. Just stay in your threat landscape. So the detection engineering process, this is actually a lot like the cyber threat intelligence process. You get direction, collection, processing, dissemination. We'll dive into each one of these. The biggest thing that we've already covered, though, is the direction side. We've already gone into what is CTI and threat understanding and how we're going to use that. So by this point, when it gets to our process, you know, they've done an emulation plan and they need to figure out how we're going to detect an alert on it from here on out. Some other things, by the way, this also could come from the defer team or the red team. So the red team could come up with their own proprietary internal technique. You know, that's cool. You can do that as well. Or it might be the defer team because maybe the defer team is actually in an active engagement. So they're handing you back some new stuff that you need to look into. Also, this could be from like a tweet you saw. Maybe you're down this week and no one's giving you CTI. So maybe you saw a different tweet or something about some new techniques. Collection. What collection is we need to know what the threat would look like in our environment, and that's where the emulation side comes in. And then where those logs are. Is it in the sim? A lot of times people say, oh, it's in the sim, and then you delve into it or you dive into it and you figure out that no, yeah, you're sending all your data from the EDR to the sim, but no, the data is actually not in there and it doesn't send all the data. So you actually need to be in the EDR, or possibly it's on the host.
We had clients that had logged for 2 years that never made it into the sim.
Oh geez, we had one. It took 20 minutes to get to the EDR from host execution, and then from there it took about a day from the EDR to the sim. So we're like, you do realize ransomware actors can operate in as little as 2 hours from initial host compromise to, you know, ransomware and exfiltration. That was a fun one. So the other thing is you have to realize is, are there visibility gaps in the logs? One example of this before, I was trying to actually detect some registry changes, and I noticed that I had to go into the sysmon config and update my sysmon config to address that gap and fix it. Sometimes you won't be able to fix the gaps. We had one client, their EDR would not catch named pipes. So with named pipes, you can actually look for default Cobalt Strike named pipes. There's some great stuff. If you have like Splunk, you can do this with sysmon, but natively out of the box, a bunch of EDRs do not track named pipes. So you're just gonna have to document that as a gap, and if it becomes a bigger concern later, at least you have it documented that it is a gap, and then you can figure out a way to address that. It could be deploying sysmon, it could be, you know, next time when you're up for renewal for your EDR, maybe you swap EDRs if that's a big concern of yours. And then you start hypothesizing detection opportunities. Processing, you want to review the collection of logs, and then you'll cast a wide net search, and you'll figure out how to actually kind of threat hunt through those logs and get down to something that you can push out as a rule and disseminate back to the organization, such as the SOC. And then from there, dissemination. This is mostly for the SOC, Security Operations Center, by the way, if you're not following along or never heard of that. But they may restart the cycle if they have a tuning request. Also, you'll often have to disseminate to either management or the CTI team so that they can record and they can do their metrics. Maybe they want, you know, track MITRE IDs or log sources that are used in there. Then you also might deliver the red team to come up with bypasses so that you can drive new direction as well. By the way, I've been going for a while, so are there any questions in Discord? Or?
We have a whole bunch stacked up for you, man.
We just been letting you roll.
Well, we're about to like kind of dive a little bit deeper into some of the other areas, so let's go ahead. What do we have?
So
We can ignore the ones from RJ.
These are actually the good ones right now. It's John.
Who's
all
asked?
right. So let's see. First one, we're not going to say who from, but it's not RJ. What defines someone's threat profile?
So a threat profile really comes down to who will target you. That's what it really boils down to. Now, trying to understand that is a struggle. But for the most part, I mean, okay, so let's say I'm a small, medium-sized company and I operate in logistics of shipping, Port of Tampa, okay? So what I'll look at then is obviously ransomware is a big concern. And then we say shipping. Who's interested in shipping? All right, so knowing some geopolitics, we'll say China could be interested in this information because it might have to deal with the, they might want any of our proprietary intellectual property due to them trying to expand in Belt and Road. You know, that's a big thing. They want to get proprietary information that helps them expand their shipping channels. So that's China. Ransomware. All right, so we're a medium-sized company doing, you know, logistics around Port of Tampa. So then you start looking at who trades with the Port of Tampa, okay? So maybe Brazil, you know, maybe a bunch of shipments come from Brazil. So then maybe they want to collect on us. Maybe they have history of collecting. I don't know. I'm just speculating here. And that's the type of process that you start going through, though, is that avenue. And then you also look at, you know, do we house any sort of data that someone could want, such as banking information of others. You know, that could be definitely a huge thing of whose banking information do we have. Would people be interested in those people's banking information? So this really goes down a slippery slope of knowing what data you have, what processes you are, who you operate with, and where you operate.
So I'll throw you a softball one. This one is from RJ. Is a cyber range the same thing as threat emulation or just another CompTIA buzzword?
So I would argue it's not a, it's a cyber range in production. That's the way I would put it. It's a cyber range in production because you want people actively testing your production and doing your responses in production. I've seen time and time again where someone's like, hey man, I crushed this cyber range. It's like, that's cool. Now do it with your tech stack, not the cyber range tech stack. And then it's like people come back from boss of the SOC and they're like, oh man, I can catch all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, they gave you all these apps. Do you have those apps on your Splunk? No. All right, well, they gave you all that Sysmon data. Do you have Sysmon data in your Splunk? No. All right, well, how are you going to do the same stuff that you did in Boss of the SOC here now? And then, so that's one of those things where cyber range is great. You do learn, but production is definitely the spot that you want to be doing your emulations.
All right, next one. So Vod asks, do you feel that threat emulation can be beneficial for most companies, or do they need a certain maturity level to be able to benefit from something like this?
I think it depends on your strategic objective. If your objective is to actually try to prevent threats or prevent impacts from threats, then yes, you want this. You want to do emulation, you want to take the time. If you're like, hey, we don't care if we get hit by ransomware, we have insurance for it, we just want to meet compliance, then you're probably not going to care to do this because it takes time and money, it takes resources, but you get great outcomes by utilizing those resources. So it really comes down to the strategic objective of the organization, if they want to allocate those resources or not. But if you're an organization that has a bunch of money in a low maturity model or low maturity, then yeah, this can help you drive that maturity up. Definitely, you know, identifying logging gaps. If you're not logging host data, this will quickly highlight that you're not logging host data, and you will have all the metrics in the world to say, hey, we definitely need to go log host data.
So next one then, okay, So if we have a company that's probably not ready for this, the full scope of this here, are there smaller steps that someone can take to kind of bring them up to this level?
Yeah, definitely the Atomic Red team. Oh. So you can actually come into Atomic Red team and I think that they have like some where you can actually just copy and paste. Let's see. Yeah, so they just have like, they even give you the nice little like copy, and you can actually just copy and paste. Some will just be straight PowerShell that you can copy and paste out. That's a good starting point. Just start going through all these different atomic tests. And there's quite a bit of atomic tests out there, as you can see, so it's definitely a good starting point to go through and start that way.
Okay. So again, we have a customer that wants to do some sort of red team, purple team exercise, but they're pretty clueless. Is there a standard kind of default scenario that you could start them with, or is it better just to focus on best practices to kind of help them ramp their detection capabilities?
So typically, if you're wanting to get someone going on purple teaming, are they trying to ask what you should purple team or how you should pitch it to purple team?
No, so you've got a company that doesn't know what they don't know, and they don't know where to start. So they've seen this talk. Someone said, hey, I saw a site, they were talking about this CTI circle, and we need to do some of this. Here's money, make it happen, and you've got a bunch of people sitting around a room going, what do we do now? So how would you guide that kind of scenario?
I would go out and shameless plug, but there were some smart people at our org who wrote a whole purple team exercise framework, and that lays out everything you need to pretty much do in the process of it.
Cool.
So it's free. You do have to input some stuff. Just tell Yoni you don't want to be bothered, or I can tell him for you. Or I'm sure there's free one. Actually, I think we actually host this on our GitHub. I think there's a bypass. I'll check. If it's on our GitHub, I'll post the link. I'm pretty sure it might be there.
Okay, that's all I got for now. Those are the ones I've captured.
So one of the things after you get to the collection side, understanding data sources is actually a huge part of this. And it doesn't actually get down to the log level. So a lot of times you'll see someone say like, oh, the data source is process. Okay, well then you also need to get down to the data component. And by the way, this is an example from a MITRE attack page for PowerShell, the technique of PowerShell being used. So these are all the data sources you see, and then the data components as well. So you have command execution for command, module load for module, and then also script execution for script. And we're going to focus on process with process creation. So if you remember, we saw a process with process creation, but what we have to really get down to is understanding relationships. So you have a parent-child process, or you have a user in a process. So maybe a user is typically, the Windows system, the administrator account of system for the computer could be typically the user that launches the process. So then if a user launches the process that's not system, and I know that's confusing, but there is a user called system. So bear with me. But so typically, you know, this application could always be launched by the user of system. So then if user Crispy launches that application or that process, that might be suspicious. You also could have, you know, process with a connection. There's different relationships all around. User executed command, process to IP. You have all sorts of different things that you also have to delve into. And then you have to map these out to your event logs as well. Because when MITRE ATT&CK provides something, they don't say that, hey, this is going to be a, you know, when they give you their list of what you need logging wise to detect PowerShell, they don't tell you that you need, you know, PowerShell command logs of, I'm drawing a blank right now. There's actually, what is it? There's script block logging. That's one of the best logs that you can get, but they're not actually going to tell you it's script block logging. They're just going to say command execution is the data source. They don't tell you, you know, carbon black response is data source. They don't tell you, you know, Windows Advanced Threat Protection data source either. So that's where it comes out to the InfoSec community to really actually get down to the event logs, and it also might be particular to your organization. If you have trouble though doing this, you can click in, and sometimes they will give you some slight hints when you actually click on it. And like this one tells you that if you're running Sysmon, it's event ID 1, or Windows event ID 4688. One of the ways that you're able to actually map out the logs though for your organization is Detect. Detect's kind of cool because it actually lets you overlay your coverage on a MITRE ATT&CK navigator, and then you can hover over and it'll tell you what your products are for the file sources and all that jazz. So it's a cool thing to have. Management seems to like these type of things. It also highlights some of your detection gaps or your logging gaps. So it's a nice thing to have. And you can fill it out by just going to the Detect editor. I actually have a file out on my GitHub. And so one of the things with Detect that is a pain, and I think they're going to be updating it. Rob tweeted at me the other, like a month ago. I think it was Rob or Marcus. There's two guys who work on it. But one of the things that I don't like about their navigator, oh, sorry, live navigation. It's always fun to do this. So the Detect, you have to do new file, which actually really stinks because you have to come in and you have to add the data sources. And if you look, it doesn't even tell you what the data sources are. But if you go A, it's like, oh, you need active DNS. And I'm like, well, yeah, sure, I'd like that. And then you come down and you have to actually find like all the data sources. And it's like a very pain in the butt thing to do. So what I did, and they said they're going to be putting in a button where you can just auto-populate. But I have a file out there. You can upload it from select file, YAML file, and then it actually auto-populates all the data sources. So then all you have to do is you just come in, and you're like, okay, the first data source is Active Directory object modification. Click it, and then you can say, do we have it? Do we not? You can leverage it, and then you move on. And you can say, well, we don't have active DNS, delete that one, and then you just would continue down the list that's already pre-populated. So that's out there. I'll share the YAML later, so you don't have to go through and add every data source. You can just nicely go down the other side, which is much easier. Once you get done with that survey of what we collect, what we don't, you pop it out. You have to run some Python, and then it spits out the coverage map. So it's a nice little thing. And then one of the things we like to talk about that people just don't really think often are where are my logs located. And so in this example, we're going to say net view all domain. So who thinks that this would be in a sim? So no one, okay. Who thinks that this would be in a firewall log? No one. Who thinks it would be in an EDR log? Okay, so we get some maybes, right? Who thinks you probably don't, most organizations probably don't even have logs on this. So we get a lot of that. All right.
Sounds about right.
So typically you're looking at actually like multiple things here. Because of net, a command of net is actually going to launch net or net1.exe, and you'll actually have that execution of that process. And then hopefully you also have the execution with the command line parameters. You might also have the command line parameters of the parent process, such as CMD or PowerShell, launching this as well. If you run unmanaged PowerShell, which means you're not going to get the PowerShell logs necessarily, the only way you can detect this is not the PowerShell line, but the net execution with the view all domains. So you get into multiple areas of where your data could be, but do know that it most likely would be in an EDR or maybe a SIM if you are ingesting sysmon. And side note to that, one of my friends, he actually has CrowdStrike deployed, but he figured out that he couldn't get as much that he wanted out of CrowdStrike. They don't have a great way of querying their data. They don't let you build out a lot of custom rules. Obviously, they're able to do that for their team on the back end, but they don't give you that full capability. And they had an unlimited Splunk license, which is like unheard of, but he's at a financial institution, so good for them. They ended up deploying sysmon as well to complement their EDR. And I've seen that in bigger organizations or government organizations where you deploy EDR and sysmon for that ultra monitoring aspect. And then you get into, after you've gotten the collection side, you do have logs, you got to get into the processing. This is where experience really comes in hand, just because of knowing what looks fishy someplace. Definitely, it helps with experience, or it helps knowing what is common as well. But you can do a lot of this just by searching the data and learning what goes on or doesn't go on in your organization. So you want to test the hypothesis by casting a wide net, and then you'll narrow down the search until you have limited false positives. Like we said, analytics can assist in this. So common questions that you want to ask is, what is the application, the command, and how is it used maliciously? So example, PowerShell runs encoded command to download a malicious enumeration script. We're figuring out what PowerShell is doing maliciously. How often is the process executed in normal operations? For example, how often is encoded PowerShell used, or how often is PowerShell used to download files? All right, these are things that we're starting to get some basic baselines of what's on our network. If it's rare for any of those things, such as encoded commands could be rare, or they could be common in your organization. If it's rare, you can go ahead and you can probably start alerting on it. If PowerShell is never used to download files, you can go ahead and alert on that. And then you also can look at how is the application or procedure leveraged in your environment. So we're going to say Oracle spawns encoded PowerShell to download files in our environment. All right, we've realized how this is used in our environment in a non-malicious format. We can go ahead and we can tune out Oracle's processes. And that goes into, are there common parent processes that you can tune out or that you can tune into? Sometimes you're wanting to tune into a parent process. Are there common child processes that you can tune out or tune into as well. You know, if Excel spawns a command prompt, that might be something that we want to tune into. Is it used with common command line parameters you can tune out or into as well? So we have parent process, child process, command line parameters, and then network connections. Does the process make network connections or does it not? Can you baseline and tune them out? The other thing is with network connections, you might have to look at, you know, is it only connecting to local host typically, and then now that process is connecting outbound, things like that, or does it connect internal but doesn't connect external, so we should flag external, or maybe the process typically only goes external, and maybe we want to flag if it connects internally. Different things like that. So quick example of this. This was just for WMIC. This is a lab, not a production environment, but we can see just by going to the analytics on this, and you know, Splunk or Elk, they all do this. You can list top 10, top 20, top whatever, or you can do rare. If you look up here, there's rare values as well, or top values as well. So you can start tuning in or out of things this way. All I looked for was WMIC execution. In this example, I would go in and I would say, SSM agent worker.exe, what is that? And then, you know, after my investigation, I say, okay, this is an approved application from Amazon. And then I would tune those two values out. And then I'd be left with only my malicious values. Now, obviously, something else non-malicious may eventually flag that rule someday, but I'm just trying to catch suspicious things. So that's just WMIC execution. Sometimes, you know, you might not be able to do this, but maybe you can do WMIC execution with a network connection.
So talking about the rare values, Crispy, when I was on the blue side and we were doing our missions, more often than not, that was a very good way to get a quick, easy win, or to get a part of the trail to find out where we need to go, is you're finding that thing that's happened once in an environment of several thousand people. That's obviously an anomaly and needs to be looked at. Or also looking for things that happen on a heartbeat within like a certain jitter, give or take left or right. If you can find those couple kinds of things, it gives you a really quick way to get on the hunt, get in the trail, and find where you need to be and what's actually going on, as opposed to just looking at your dashboards and going, holy fuck, there's stuff everywhere. What do I do?
Yep, definitely. Rare's a great one if you're trying to quote unquote threat hunt. And then it you know, one of the things is like if you look for like rare, if you look for like rare startup registry keys, like that's a pretty good one. It's hard to alert on every, or even go through and tune out every registry key. So there's certain areas where, you know, you do have to like say we're going to come up with like a dashboard or something to detect rare events. Or you can actually set it to, some sims will let you set to alert on low event counts. So you can say like, hey, new registry startup keys were set, but this is on 100 systems, don't alert, you know, but if it's one over the past day, then flag. But that's gonna be like a report typically, so you're not gonna get the exact hit, you know, the second it happens. Detection focus. Once again, we'll dive into or dive up the pyramid of pain. We just want to say that this is where your greatest value is, because if all you're doing is, and I've seen this before, I like interviewed one time, and I think like I blew their minds about like what I was saying with like how to actually actionize cyber threat intelligence and stuff. They clearly did not want to take all their phishing emails and detonating the payloads and doing all the grabbing of everything you can. They were wanting someone to go out and pretty much grab IP and hashes, and then they wanted those to get searched in their SIM. If you're paying someone to do that, you're not getting a good return on investment, because you most likely, you're not going to catch anything. You might catch like one thing a year. When I was at Raytheon, I think we had an automated system to do this, and it caught like 3 events. And most of those events, I think like 2 of the 3 events or whatever it was actually were just like old malware with old IOCs. Every now and then you might like the other one event was like a pop on something newer, but the thing is yeah, that was a great little check, but honestly, having the host analysis and being able to catch that, like I think it was like a trick bot. So like there's common logic that we would have like in all of our customers to detect trick bot. So there's other ways to detect it besides this. You shouldn't waste your time on what IP or hash trick bot's using. You know, you want to focus on the TTP that trick bot's using. You know, maybe it's the initial infection vector or the initial vector of coming in through Excel and what it kicks off that process chain. Maybe you want to learn on that, and that way it doesn't matter what the freaking IP is because you're catching it at a greater with a greater capability. So that's just what we're viewing is this is the greatest value. This is where you get return on investment. So that's what we're trying to drive towards. This is one of the things from our detection opportunity and Conti emulation plan. The emulation plan is out there. You can pretty much run it yourself if you want to. I think George actually even posted like how to. But one of the things I hear like all the time is, oh, we can't catch who am I? And I'm like, well, have you tried? And typically people are like, well, no. But this is one of those things, depending upon your organization and how large you are, all right, maybe you really can't tune in, or maybe you really can't tune a rule for who am I. You just can't tune all this stuff out. But if you go into the Conti playbook, or even if you go to like the latest DFIR report, let me see. Let's see. I hope this actually works. Oh, no, I don't want that. Ah, there we go. Look at that. So, our report, and this was back, oh wait, dang it, this is a different one. It's groups. I guess this one didn't run groups. But what you can start doing is, there's plenty of other ones out there that run groups. You can look at tuning into things. So like this one is who am I /all. I bet you the /all command barely gets used in your organization. Or I bet you the /group command also gets used in your organization. Because typically all people run is who am I. So that's one of those things where, okay, if you really can't tune it, maybe you can actually just tune on some of those command line parameters that the adversaries are using. Now this is the other thing, like you really, really should flag on this, because if someone's doing NL test with domain trust, or if they're doing NL test domain trust all, that means they're enumerating your domain and the domain's trust. I don't know of like anyone or any tool that actually runs these. You will, if you just try to tune into NL test execution, you'll probably get a decent amount of noise. But you should really tune into these parameters of the domain trust. And I think that one's probably on here. No, they do local group administrators, which is another one. Which is, I actually have that one here. But you can see there's a lot of overlap. So as you build out these detection capabilities, you have different overlap areas. So here we have NetView, NetGroup, the view all these, yeah, you can't flag on net execution or net1.exe execution, but you can certainly just start flagging on these command line parameters. Another example that we'll go over for detection engineering, we've mentioned before that you have certain parent-child relationships, or child processes that will be suspicious. So this is actually from the NSA. They came out and they said, hey, these are rarely launched by IAS apps. So you really want to go through your W3WP, which is your IAS applications, and you want to look for any of these being launched. And the great thing about this is if you actually take some of this and you apply it for Log4j and you look for some of these things coming off of Java, you already detect a 0-day. So that's 0-day detection right there. And you really should do that for Java, W3WP, and Apache. I'm missing one other common one that's also used in web servers, but it's not as big right now because Java. Suspicious parent-child relationships. Another example is Excel. So in this one we have WinWord spawning cmd.exe, and then so that could be suspicious. And then we also have Excel spawning rundll32. I can tell you that's definitely suspicious. And there's some great links out here of things that you can actually go ahead and start using these rules and searches to base out your environment as well.
Calc should never spawn anything.
I always thought Xwizards was pretty good.
I like the name of this, Squibbly Doo. Suspicious process use of network. So this is PowerShell. PowerShell may call out to external addresses, but you should probably just go ahead and alert on this and then baseline those out. If anything, at least catch it if it goes out to GitHub. That's like a quick win. If PowerShell is going out to GitHub, like 99% of the time, it's probably like grabbing like a PS1 that's malicious.
I'm just trying to build a new tool. Leave me alone.
So in this example, it's like is.gd. Anyways, this is Mimikatz. This is like the one-liner Mimikatz where it downloads it and it invokes Mimikatz. So it's a credential dumper, and this is just an example of one way. But anyways, you should definitely alert on PowerShell going outbound with a network connection. Process use of network, run DLL32. If you want to catch almost every ransomware actor out there, they use the default of Cobalt Strike, and it's run DLL32.
$3.99.
Let's see if they've changed recently. Oh, yep. That's their Cobalt Strike beacon. They're in run DLL32. So, what was that? Yep. So this is like a really common technique. This is like a very long common technique now of this ISO file. This ISO file is used to smuggle in. But then the result is there's going to be a DLL that's executed via run DLL32, and then that's going to be the C2 channel. So anytime you see run DLL32 making network connections, it's probably a malicious actor. And this is why it's typically ransomware, is because a Cobalt Strike defaults there. Today, run DLL32 is the process Cobalt Strike will spawn when it needs a one-off process to inject something into. So it also does that as well, but people also do the run DLL32 to the DLL as well. And that actually bypasses a lot of EDRs right off the bat, and you don't even need like a spiffy EDR thing. They will kind of alert on it. They'll be like, oh, this is suspicious, but is your SOC really gonna actually do anything about it? So another example, so this is a suspicious file write example. So here we have PowerShell writing an LNK file. It detects PowerShell writing files, or what you should seek to do is detect PowerShell writing files with .lnk extensions. If there's too much noise to focus on, you might want to focus into app data or the start menu program startup. This actually came out of Red Canary's thing, and I believe they actually have an atomic red team test for this. Yep. So they actually have detection logic here, and they have an atomic red team test. So you can go ahead and you can do this. And then if you want to, there's also a Sigma rule that I published out to the Sigma repo. And if you're not familiar with Sigma, one of the great things about Sigma, let's see. There we go. So if you take this and you pipe it in uncoder, boom, you have a Splunk query. You want an elastic rule or elastic alert? Boom, you have an elastic alert. And then they have other things as well that you can get into. Some might not work, but like Sentinel-1, nope. But a bunch of these it'll do. ArcSight, so there you go. So you can do that with pretty much any Sigma rule. The way it's configured, you can pipe it in over here and get it to your SIM. So yeah, that's a PowerShell writing a link file. That's just an example of a suspicious file write. So we're just covering different types. Registry events, run keys. We went over this before. We said that in a brief conversation, we're saying, you could filter on rare events, finding rare ones. This one is one that you can tune into. You probably want to catch any time that one's written to be executed from app data roaming. So that's an example of a registry event and something to tune into. Suspicious DLL loads. So we talked about PowerPick, which is unmanaged PowerShell. This is where PowerShell gets loaded, but without PowerShell.exe. So what you're looking for is you're looking for these DLL loads. I can tell you, if you only have AV in your environment, you don't have EDR, or you don't have Sysmon, you will not detect anyone at all PowerShelling throughout your whole organization. Right now, ransomware actors, I haven't seen any cyber threat intelligence to indicate that they leverage this, but if they have Cobalt Strike, it's a very easy click to do so, and then they're hiding all their PowerShell. So looking for the anomalous loads of those DLLs is a huge win. Some common things too that we'll speed through: LawBass executions. These are huge. Process of WMIC with a command line that contains process call create. One of the great things too about LawBass that you can do now is you can come in, and at the top of any LawBass, there's actually detections now. They went through and they added all these detection areas. So once again, there's Sigma. So you can take that Sigma rule and you can pipe it in uncoder if you want to. But anything with process call create, flag it now. That's definitely suspicious. You might have to tune some things out. MS build. If non-developers are using MS build, flag on that ASAP. That's usually going to be a malicious actor trying to compile and run code as they've gotten it in. It's a way to execute without actually having the application. Detect suspicious MSHTA execution. This is a common execution technique. We're not going to dive into it as much, but just know that these LawBasses are out there. CMSTP, especially with /NI or /S, is a huge one. Just go through like the whole project of LawBass, and you can click on any of these, figure out how it's being used maliciously, and detection capabilities around them. One of the things is a lot of your EDRs will have some basic stuff, but they won't actually flag on things as well as you can engineer them because they don't baseline to your environment. So being able to baseline to your environment is a huge win. The final step of the process is dissemination. This is where we've gone out, we've figured out, what are we tuning into? Is it a parent-child relationship? Is it a process with a registry event? Is it a process with a file write? Is it a process with a network connection? Is it certain command line parameters? We've gone out, we've asked our questions, we've threat hunted through it, we've tuned down, we now have a searchable rule. We have to disseminate that out, deliver to stakeholders. SOC is going to be expecting something. We had to deliver that with documentation. We also, like we said before, management and CTI and distribute to the red team. If no structure exists, which it typically doesn't, don't know why, but that's just the case. We definitely recommend Palantir's alerting and detection strategy, the ADS. ADS is a really good framework. It goes in, it has your goals, so you say, hey, we're trying to detect X, and here's why. It categorizes it. You go ahead and you tag things like TTPs and such, phases of the kill chain, different things like that. This helps develop situational awareness so that you have a categorization, so when people are reading through, they say, oh, this is, tactic XYZ. You also have strategy. I think that's strategy of testing, and then you have strategy of detecting. Then you also have technical context. So the technical context is it's kind of the write-up from a detection engineer or a incident responder. Should this alert fire? Here's the technical context so that a SOC analyst can respond. It might also have certain steps that SOC analyst will take as well. Blind spots and assumptions, these are huge things to go over. What are you assuming what are you assuming about this that could actually lead it to be ineffective? Or what are blind spots that could lead it to be ineffective? What are false positives that may occur so that SOC analysts know and they're not chasing their tails for 4 hours? And you could have just said, hey, this false positive might occur from this process, and here's why. That puts more context around it. Validation is pretty much going through and saying that we have tested it, the red team executed it, it did fire. They executed the procedure and it did fire. Priority level. When we're disseminating to a SOC, we have to have a priority level. Is this a low alert? Is this a high alert? Typically, since we're focusing on those TTP aspects, we're at the top of the pyramid. Typically, our alerts are going to be pretty high and need to be looked at. And then also the response. This is, if detected here, this is really the step-by-step response that we are expecting. Potentially, it could be, enacting IR ASAP, incident response, as soon as possible. So that's pretty much the whole process. That's all I had for tonight. Made it about an hour and a half, hour 10. But anyways, we'll open it up to questions. We can go into other things. The key takeaways are just knowing how tune into like those, the suspicious parent-child relationship. The parent-child relationships are huge. Different flags like we see here with the domain admins being enumerated. That's definitely weird. Suspicious PowerShell with external IPs. It could be the process. Like we said before, when we're asking our questions, does the process make network connections or not? That's something that we'll need to look into. And then we'll also look at, parent-child processes. I actually just I built out like a whole Splunk dashboard today that's pretty awesome around our tool, and it goes into trying to baseline like all that stuff, and it's pretty neat, but I'll show that some other time. But yeah, just get in there, baseline those different aspects out, and try to find some interesting things.
So one of the other questions that we've come up is what's your methodology for knowing what logs to start with first?
So, let me see. I hope I know my password.
Browser has a password, but not user.
Left, up, down, left, right, EA, select start.
That fucks me every time too. If I ask for email, it's usually okay because I can figure that one out. But when I ask for username, I'm like, whoop, don't remember what this was.
It's like it's probably like in.
I've just come to the realization if I lose my password manager, I'm just fucked. I'm just starting over again, get a new social. Because I don't know anything.
Anyways, I wish I could show it. So, typically, what you're gonna do, you're going to know when a red team engages the test to generate the logs, or you as a detection engineer do the test to generate the logs, you are going to have a process ID and the host that it's executed on. So what you typically do is you start looking around that process ID for those logs. Or if you have certain command line parameters, you can just start searching for those command line parameters. Otherwise, you have to go through the way of, where is it? Otherwise, you have to do this type of thing, which is go to MITRE, you know your technique, you know the data component, and you start trying to map it down. So that's the other way. I prefer the search for it in my SIM or my EDR, and hopefully I find something. If not, got to figure out why you don't have anything.
All right, so we've seen a lot of thank yous and good talks come across. If you've got any last minute questions, now's the time to get them into the thread before we close things down on you.
We have like another 5 minutes. I'll get up. I'll like walk through this process real quick.
Okay.
I mean, if people want to hang out. I mean, I guess it's like sitting on their couch or something, so. Unless you got to go put, kids to bed or something. Let's see.
What's a valid instance where you've actually seen who MIUs?
Valid?
Yeah.
Off of different processes, especially installs, they'll check to see what they're running as or something with the permissions. So that's one thing. I'm gonna have to stop this share. And then I'm gonna have to start up over here.
So, Crispy, do you want to shut things down for the stream and just play here, or what?
I can do it on the stream.
Okay.
It's fine. I don't want people missing out just because of. I mean, is YouTube charging us by the minute?
Oh, no.
Nope, just Chris.
Sorry, Chris. Make you stay a little. For like 5 minutes. You'll be fine. We'll get you a beer. I don't need that. All right. Oh, cool. So they can still see. Or, nice. Alrighty then. All right, what logs to look at? And now, mind you, this is with Sysmon, so typically you actually have to perform this setup in your EDR tool. But what we have is I've ran 2 campaigns this past week. These are emulation plans. And I have all these empty fields down here. They'll populate later. So I have my one plan, which is the ONC plan. I executed on a DC, and then I also get my process ID. So I know my endpoint is DC. I can see my process ID is 3508, and then I'll go ahead and I'll run my searches on that. Now I have my process name. So I'll take that, I'll plug that in. I also have my process GUID, which is a unique identifier. One of the things is like sometimes it can be a pain if someone's masquerading as another process that's commonly used, then you're like, well, shoot, I can't just search on that process. So GUID is actually a great one, especially for masquerading and things like that. So now I'll search on those. So now I come down, and like we said, oh, I have like my nice graphs of what the parent-child relationship is. So like right off the bat, I can see that this is leveraging proc dump exe. Maybe I need to go look, how often that's used in my environment, proc dump 64. Also we have like run DLL32. So maybe I want to look at how often applications launch run DLL32. The other thing that I have up on my board for initial investigation is I have network connections. So here we see one's going out to a 152 address. So I probably want to look more into that. Like, why is this exe going out there? Or if I ran the DLL, run DLL32.exe with my DLL, then this would be coming off of run DLL32. So I'd also say, like, why is run DLL32 calling out to 152 address? That's something suspicious. The other thing I go ahead and I highlight here that's populated now is my command line logs. So I can start digging through those. And these are command line logs of the process spawning child processes. And then the other things I get are, these are all the logs that contain that process ID on that host. You can also do all the logs for the GUID as well instead of the process ID if you want to do it that way. And then over here are the actual commands. So I don't have one of my Scythe instances up. I wasn't trying to do a shameless vendor plug. I don't believe that we should be doing vendor plugs here. But these are the logs that came from my Scythe instance over into Splunk. So these are all the requests ran by the emulation plan, so I can see what it was trying to do. And I can actually start from the beginning. So I can see that like it started, it did some loads, it did invoke script block, and I can actually go through and I can see the different processes and the steps that it took, and it's also tagged to MITRE as well. So that's a quick, easy way of how to start figuring out where to look.
So question, so if it's trying to track to MITRE, what if there's a pattern that MITRE doesn't have yet? Has that happened?
So that's a great question, especially because MITRE will only publish things that are publicly observed. So there has to be a public observation. So that means if it's internal to your system and you haven't publicized that this new TTP is out, then they're not going to do anything. What you can do is, what is it called? you can do this multiple ways, but I think, oh, there it is. Did I get it? I did. When you're actually doing out your detect editor, you can actually add techniques into here. I think there's also a way that you can do it on the attack navigator as well. I think attack navigator lets you add.
I know it does, but I have never.
I don't know offhand, but there's. I'd have to look it up, or I'd have to ping someone over there. If you're not, by the way, if you're not in the MITRE Slack, there's an attack Slack that's actually pretty good. But you can't go to them and say like, hey, y'all should add this. They'll be like, well, did you publicly post this new technique that was used by an adversary? And you'll be like, no. And they're like, well, we can't add it then. But yeah, if you add it in the detect, I think there's a way to do it actually in here. I'd have to look that up, but you definitely can also do it in the detect editor as well. So there's ways, or you can always, I've seen where people just have like their own Excel sheet with their own techniques as well. So. I think what we actually did, instead of like what we did when I was at Raytheon, so with the attack tags, how it's like T1115, we would just do like R or something like that, just to know that it was one of like our internal ones. So
all right, let's give Crispy a round of applause. All right, for the folks on the stream, don't forget, next week we're having our socials. So come out and play, say hi as we close out the year. After that, on the 31st, we have our annual shoot. So if you're into that, we'll be posting details in the Discord later as that comes around. So that's it as we close out 2021. Have a great one, and we'll see you around soon. Bye, folks.